Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ben here, and today I'm going to be doing a video about the NBA and the upcoming free agency class, and I'm going to be talking a bit about second tier free agents because I feel like I've sufficiently covered first tier free agents like Paul George and LeBron, and Kawhi's not a free agent, but I've covered him in some trade video. And so today I'm going to be talking about the guys who I think are below the top level. So they're not like superstars or perennial all-stars, but they're guys who, are at that next tier where they're really legit players who can make a big difference on a team, or they're looking to have a bounce back season, so they might be taking a discount price compared to what they would normally take, etc. like that. I'm going to be talking about 5 players, and for each of them I've come up with 4 destinations where they might end up. So I'm going to talk about how each fit would work for each guy and what I think would be their best road going forward. So the first guy I am going to talk about is DeAndre Jordan of currently the Los Angeles Clippers. And so the first team that I think he could go with is the Clippers again. I think he could just re-sign with them and keep it going. He's already making a pretty decent salary now, about $20 million. I don't think that he's a max salary player. I feel like if he did sign for the max somewhere, it would be because he is signing with a terrible team, somebody who's just willing to throw a ton of money at the wall just for the sake of spending it. This free agency class is interesting because there's actually not a ton of money to be spent by many teams. The Lakers are really the team that has tons of money to spend, but other teams like, we keep hearing a lot about the Rockets and teams like Boston being involved in moves this offseason, but they really don't have much free agency space as far as just free cap space to spend on players. The 76ers have a lot of cap space too, about 40 million, 35-ish maybe. But them and the Lakers are really the only teams with like a surplus of a good amount. The other teams have, there are some teams with a decent amount, but not a ton. But, okay, getting back to DeAndre. So I think the Clippers is a good spot if he can't really find anything that enticing, or he doesn't really get offered the amount of money he wants, something like that. And he could just end up going back to the Clippers, signing for a similar contract, maybe a little bit more, maybe like 25 instead of 20-ish or 22, what he's making now. And that's an option, He basically would be the guy there because Blake is gone and Lou Williams is the only other pretty good player. Tobias Harris too, but he's pretty new and might not stick around that long. So it's really DeAndre's team at this point. So he could definitely go or just stay there and not leave town. Another option I have is the Phoenix Suns. So there's been a lot of talk about Clint Capella going to the Phoenix Suns for possibly a max contract offer. But I don't know, that could just be a big rumor and not really be true, and he could just end up getting offered something significantly less, and the Rockets could just re-sign him. But in that case, I think that Phoenix could sign DeAndre Jordan because I think he and Clint Capella are honestly about the same player, good at blocking, good at rebounding. They have no range as far as shooting and basically only shoot from the painted area and not even that far out sometimes, more like a 3-foot range. Basically just a finisher from Chris Paul lobs, honestly. So I think Phoenix could sign DeAndre Jordan for a little bit less than max if Clint Capella is not available because the Rockets retain him. So besides that, I think the flipped coin of that would be the Rockets as a destination. If the Rockets end up letting Clint Capella go in free agency, I think that they could and let's say they miss out on Paul George or LeBron, I could see them clearing a little bit of space and signing DeAndre for around $20 million. This would probably mean having to trade away Trevor Ariza or Ryan Anderson, and they could not really make this happen last year, but I honestly think that they could make it happen if they try again this year. And I think he'd be really comfortable in Houston because he'd just fill that role that Clint Capella played last year. So there's already a carved out role for him. And also he'd be back with Chris Paul, which is where he does best, I think, because Chris Paul is great at lobbing it to the big guys. And so for all these different guys I have on here, I'm going to throw in one last team that I think is sort of more out there and not as likely but could happen. And so for DeAndre Jordan, my team is Dallas. Now, I feel like maybe this wouldn't be the most likely spot because of the whole debacle 2 years ago during free agency where he was in and was out and didn't really end up signing with them. But I think that they have plenty of cap space, and Nerlens Noel will be a free agent, so they'll have a spot at center for him if he wants it. And it's really a thing like the pitch they gave him 2 years ago. Yes, Harrison Barnes is there, but this really isn't anybody's team. It's really up for grabs, and if any dominant player wants to come and have it just be their team, I think he could get more touches offensively. He could average more like 15 instead of the 12 that he's averaging perennially. He'd probably still put up around 14 rebounds a game. I think it would be a good fit for him. Going on from there, the next player I have on this list is another free agent that's been talked about a decent amount in the second tier, but I just want to give my own input, which is Jabari Parker. Now, most all reports say that he's going to go to Chicago for a big offer, probably around $25 million or $20 million. And I don't know. I think it's an okay pick. The main reason is because he's from Chicago, and so people think that that's a natural fit. It's a young team that's looking for a first option, and he is still very young, probably around 23, I'm thinking, 24 maybe. He can put up 20 points a game or more if he's the number one option on a team. He's put up around 20 as Giannis's second option in the past couple of years. But the thing about him is injuries. So he might not even get the full contract. He might have to sign for more like 16 or 18 because I don't know if he's going to be able to command that top dollar price. So another team I have for Jabari Parker who I like is, again, Dallas. I think that's a similar situation to what I just said about DeAndre. They're a team that doesn't really have a primary guy, and they have cap space. And if he wants to come there and sort of be the second Harrison Barnes in Dallas, I think they'd welcome it. Another guy that can average 18 to 20 a game. They moved Harrison Barnes to the power forward this last season and played Dirk at the 5 a bit or Nerlens Noel at the 5 a bit. I think that Harrison Barnes is more of a 3 though, and Jabari's a little bit slower than most small forwards. He can still play small forward, but he's just not as effective. And he's really transitioned more into a small ball power forward. And I think that's why he would fit great in Dallas is because they like that small ball forward where you really have a small forward playing the position. But Harrison Barnes, I think, is a little too skinny to play that. So I think Parker would be a better fit. He's a little bit bulkier and he's more used to playing it. And he can also shoot and fill it up if he has to be the primary scorer for some reason. And you'd have a nice little nucleus there of Dennis Smith, Harrison Barnes, and Jabari Parker, and they'd all be relatively young. And you could build upon that, included with this next draft pick coming up in the draft here. The next team I have, I also think is very intriguing. It is the New Orleans Pelicans, and I think the thing that is intriguing about that is that New Orleans really doesn't have a secondary scorer, so to speak. You could say Drew Holiday is a second option, or if Boogie resigns, he's a second option. But I guess this is more of a scenario in which they don't try to resign DeMarcus Cousins. I think that it could be pretty cool to try, and with that free cap space, they would sign Jabari. But a lineup of, let's say, Rondo, if they re-sign him, Drew Holiday, Jabari Parker, Nikola Mirotic, and Anthony Davis, I like that lineup a lot. You may give up a little bit on defense because Mirotic isn't a great defender, and Davis has to play the 5 and defend a little bit of bigger guys, and Parker would be a little bit slow at the 3. But I think that the size issue with Davis having to play the 5 is compensated for, and that Parker is a little bit bigger of a 3-man, and Mirotic is pretty big too. He's like 6'10", 6'11". And if you want to throw some random guy in there at center, like a Jensa, or if you re-sign Okafor, you could throw him in at the 5, have Davis at the 4, and then go big with Mirotic at the 3 and have Parker come off the bench, or flip Parker and Mirotic and have Mirotic come off the bench. So I think that could open up a lot of possibilities for them. He stretches the floor if you want more floor spacing. And, if you just needed to put the ball in a guy's hands and have him go get a bucket, I think that Jabari Parker is a better option than Drew Holiday for that. And so that's why I like him on the Pelicans, because they don't really have that guy, so to speak, a wing player that can just get their own shot. And I think that he fills that role very well. And so the last team I have on here that's a bit of a stretch is the Pacers. Now, the Pacers have cap space, not a ton. He'd probably have to sign for under $15 million or maybe $15 million at the most. I like the idea of him going here, though. I think that Indiana is the start of what we could call positionless basketball. Them and Milwaukee, coincidentally, that Jabari plays in Milwaukee. But Indiana, Victor Oladipo can play the point or the shooting guard position. Thad Young can play the 3 or the 4. Al Jefferson can play the 4 or the 5. Miles Turner, the 4 or the 5. Bogdanovich, the 2 or the 3. No guy on their team besides probably Darren Collison, who's 6 feet tall and can only play point, can play more than one position. All of them are guys that can switch around, play multiple positions. And I think Parker would mix well in that you could have a starting lineup of, let's say, Collison, Oladipo, Parker, Thad Young, and Miles Turner, with coming off the bench Bogdanovich and Sabonis and Lance Stevenson and Al Jefferson. I think that looks like a really good core. You add another guy that can get his own shot besides Oladipo. Collison can too, but he's so small that it can sometimes limit him as far as efficiency goes. So I think that Parker could be a good option. Also a floor spacer if you want a floor spaced lineup at the end of the game. Thad Young has an okay 3-point shot, but Parker's is a bit better. So you could put out Collison, Oladipo, Bogdanovich, Parker, and Miles Turner, and then you have everybody in the lineup being able to shoot, which I think is a great asset in today's NBA. So that is my dark horse for Jabari Parker. Moving on to another highly talked about second-tier free agent is Tyreke Evans. He actually got a lot more buzz towards the trade deadline, but he's going to be a free agent this offseason. Had a great season in Memphis where he was basically the primary option. You could argue it was Marc Gasol, but I'd actually say it was Tyreke Evans. Really, he had the better year. And I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but the first place I have on tap for him is Dallas, for much the same reasons as Jabari Parker. He'd be a great second option behind Harrison Barnes. The only problem with him going to Dallas would be that he's a primary ball handler, and that might impede Dennis Smith, who also needs the ball in his hands a lot of the time to be effective. But I think, they could stagger their minutes so they're not playing every minute together, and they could always have a primary ball handler on the floor. But I do like that idea. Tyreke isn't great at playing small forward, but if you put the ball in his hands and have him play point forward, that could work all right. And you could have the small ball 5 of Dennis Smith Jr., Wesley Matthews, Tyreke Evans, Harrison Barnes, and Dirk. That looks good on paper, may not be as good in real life, but I still think it's pretty decent. I wouldn't feel bad about having that as my 5 at the end of the game or start of a game. So yeah, I like Dallas for him too. Dallas is mainly in this because they have a decent amount of cap space that they could throw at people, and they're a very flexible franchise in that I think that you can never use too much shooting, and they're already starting to play Harrison Barnes at the 4, so they can use smaller guys if they really have to. The next team I have for Tyreke is Chicago. A lot of reasons why I would put him down for Chicago is also because Jabari is down for Chicago. They could use a wing guy that can fill it up. Chicago has cap space. Chris Dunn has done good at the point guard in the last year for them, but Tyreke could be a really good option. Just as the go-to scorer, because Dunn isn't really much of a scorer. I don't think Zach LaVine has a versatile enough game to be a go-to scorer for a team, but I think Tyreke could. And, Lauri Markkanen is a really good player too, can get a lot of shots, but can't really create his own offense, whereas Tyreke can. It's a team that sort of lacks that. You might call LaVine the guy that can make his own shot, but I don't think he has great enough skills to be able to pull that off routinely, which is why I think that, you know, his averages were actually slightly down from normal in Chicago this last year. Might be because of recovering from the ACL, might be because his offense is just limited in a certain sense, but, you know, however way you dice it, I don't know what I think of him as a primary option, but I think that Tyreek added to that could help mentor a young core. The next option I have for Tyreek is Phoenix. Similar reasons, you know, I think that they could always use another offensive option. Devin Booker, although he put up 70 points one night, can't put up 70 points every night. And he's really the end of their offense. You know, TJ Warren is decent on offense too, but I don't think he has as many offensive chops as Tyreek. If they let Elfrid Payton go in free agency, Tyreek can start at point guard, which is where he really actually likes to play, not small forward, not shooting guard, because he likes to have the ball in his hand and set up the offense himself. So that would be a really good fit for them. And, you know, they've got cap space to burn, so he could be an option. If they didn't want to commit long term, they could do like a 2-year deal, maybe pay him $20 million on 2 years, and then that goes away pretty quickly if you're getting tired of Tyreek. So I think that that's a decent option. And the last option I have is another interesting one. It's New Orleans, where he would be returning to play, where he played from around, I think it was 2013 to 2017 or 2012, some time frame like that. I really like Tyreke Evans in New Orleans. He's the guy that can create his own shot, like I was talking about with Jabari. He's way better at creating his own shot than Jabari, though. Also, you know, they already have 2 point guards, but if, let's say, you know, Drew Holiday is a guy that's missed a lot of time in his career, and having Tyreek there would not hurt. You could have an endgame lineup of Rondo, Tyreek, Holiday, Mirotic, and Davis. Now, it's not great for floor spacing because Tyreek can't shoot a great three-pointer. He was pretty good this last season, but that was the outlier compared to the rest of his career. Rondo can't shoot it well, but still it would be a decent fit. He proved himself this last year, and I think that New Orleans would welcome him back if you want to sign there. Maybe for a little bit less, because I don't think they want to give him $20 million or anything in that ballpark. He'd probably get around 13 from them, I think. But that'd be a decent fit for him. Honestly, you know, I normally might not put New Orleans on here, but the free agency market is thin. And yes, I could put a place like Philly on here, but I feel like they aren't going to pay that much money for Tyreek when they already have guys that can slash. The thing is, though, he can create his own offense, which is that's the thing that any team can use. But I think Philly would aim for bigger fish if they were going to try and attract a free agent than Tyreek. And so that the Pelicans was my sort of out there team, by the way, in case you were wondering. The next guy I have on here is an often talked about guy as well, coming off a big injury in DeMarcus Cousins. I put him in the second tier because he's coming off the big injury. Normally, when healthy, he'd be on the first tier, but he's on the second tier because we don't really know what we're getting back. So first off, for him, I have the Pelicans. He could easily just re-sign there, slide into his role like last year. Ho-hum. I think that they end up being around a 50-win team and a 5 or 6 seed with that scenario. I don't know. I think that Boogie was not made for New Orleans for some reason. He just doesn't seem to mesh well with AD. You know, people keep saying they're just figuring it out, but they basically played a whole season together, had an off season in between to help their chemistry, and they were a meddling team, like an 8th seed with both of them before Boogie went out and the Pelicans went on a tear. So I don't know. I don't see the amazing fit that other people do. I think this league is going more towards having one big guy and 2 small forwards and a shooting guard and a point guard, rather than 2 big guys like Twin Towers like the Spurs. So I don't know. I think New Orleans is fine if they go back with Boogie, but I don't think that they necessarily should. The next team I have on here is the Houston Rockets. This is under the contingency that Clint Capella signs the max offer. The Rockets would have a little money left over then and would probably have to move Ryan Anderson or Trevor Ariza. They could even sign Boogie sort of like on a 1-year prove prove to us what he can do on a bounce back thing. And if he does well, that they can re-sign him for more. You know, I think that he could pull a thing like Rondo did in Sacramento, where Rondo signed the 1-year deal for not much money and really proved himself, and then he went out and signed with other teams. Or Tyreek Evans did that too. He signed with Memphis for like $1 million for 1 year just to prove to everybody what he could do, and he did. And now he's going to get better offers. So I think Boogie could do that coming off the injury. He could go to Houston, play on a playoff team where a lot of people will be watching him and really prove to the world what he can do, and then go out next offseason and get a great deal in free agency. I think that's an option for him. I think that would be pretty cool to see the CP3, DeMarcus Cousins, James Harden, maybe even another big free agent if they can trade Ryan Anderson too and get the cap space. So we'll see about that one. The other two teams I have on here are number 1, Dallas, because same reason as most of the rest of these guys, they've got cap space and no number 1 star, so DeMarcus could come in and be the man and run the show and be the primary option and get 25 and 12 a game. They might not win more than 30 games, but hey, he'd be able to put up great numbers and be an all-star, so he could go there. The next team I have on here is the Lakers, mainly just because this has been talked about a bit. They have a ton of free agency space. He might go there in tandem with another guy, or they could do something where they sign Paul George for the max, sign Boogie for like $5 million, or $10 million, maybe if he's trying to do a bounce back thing, and sign another free agent too and get 3 guys instead of 2. I could see that happening, and maybe an additional Jabari Parker in there. I mean, why not? I would kind of like that, actually. That would be a great lineup. They would have then starting as Lonzo, probably Paul George, Jabari, Brandon Ingram, and DeMarcus Cousins. I mean, that looks pretty good to me. But yeah, that's why I think he'd go to the Lakers, just because they have the cap space and he might be able to team up with another guy. And yeah, that's really all I got for DeMarcus Cousins. My kind of out there team was the Rockets, because I don't see that happening, but you never know what could happen. And then the last guy I have on here is one that I think is way off of a lot of people's radars, but I like him, so I wanted to bring him up, which is Seth Curry. Not Steph, but Seth. He's a great shooter. He was out almost all of last season, so I think he'd be on the cheap for teams because he would really have to prove himself. I did a mix of contenders and rebuilding teams here. I have, again, on this list Dallas, who he could just re-sign with and be the 6th man or starter that he was being and probably get around 14 a game like he was getting. Another interesting option, I think, is Phoenix. If they might, they might be one of those people that offer a huge contract like the Nets did to Tyler Johnson a few years ago, but to Seth Curry. And if he did sign there, he could go there, either start with Devin Booker in sort of a hybrid starting lineup or come off the bench as the 6th man. I think he'd get a lot of touches. This is maybe if he wants to kind of be more of the primary or second option on a team and maybe get 17 to 18 points instead of 12 to 13. They wouldn't win much, but he would get more of the spotlight, which I think would be cool because I think he is a really good player. As for contenders that I have him going to, I could see him going to Philly. They need a lot of floor spacing with Simmons not being able to shoot, and maybe if Redick doesn't re-sign, I could see them going with Seth Curry to fill basically the Redick spot. So I would like him there. And if they want to sign another max free agent too, he could sign on the cheap if he's looking for the whole bounce back season type of thing. Do a 1-year cheap deal and then go somewhere else and get a really highly paid deal. He could do that. Another team I have on here, which is a team that I thought more people would think of, but or that I thought of right away as like a hand in glove fit, but Oklahoma City. You have Russell Westbrook at the 1. Paul George probably is going to leave. And, you need a wing that can shoot, because that seems to be the thing that people always talk about in this NBA. And the thing that Russ, of all the things he can do, he really can't shoot that well. So Seth Curry could balance that out, be a 3-point threat, help spread the floor, help open up gaps a little bit. basically fill in for not even a poor man's Paul George, just fill up the shooting portion of Paul George's repertoire. You might even say if Seth can improve a lot, he'd be a better shooter than Paul George. I'd say they're about equal now, slightly giving Seth the edge. But yeah, Carmelo would probably be the second option on the team, and Seth and Steven Adams would probably split the third option. I don't know who would be first between those two. But yeah, I really like him in Oklahoma City. They really need shooting, and he would be the perfect fit for that. And my dark horse, I went for a fifth team for Seth, is Golden State. They have some expiring contracts, I think, like a lot of lower level guys like McGee and Nick Young and guys like that. And if Seth is looking for the bounce back year to sign on the cheap, he could go to Golden State, play with his brother, maybe play for $5 million, get a chance at a ring, prove himself as a great sixth man, or even in a Hamptons 5 scenario where they put in Draymond, Durant, Clay, and 2 Currys. That would be a pretty good lineup. Maybe you'd want Iguodala in there instead for ball movement, but you'd have a lot of shooting. But Seth is a better shooter than Iguodala, so you'd be able to spread the floor even better than they already spread it now. So that was my dark horse team. I thought that was kind of an interesting idea. They could pair up like the Morris twins did a few years ago. And that's that, guys. That's the whole video. I went through the 5 guys, talked about some possible landing spots. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to let me know your thoughts about all this in the comments. And if you disagreed with me, let me know in the comments, because it's an interesting conversation to have where these guys end up. All right, guys. I'll see you around next time. Bye.